Today I wanted to show how easy it is to migrate a WordPress site to Ymir. I figured the best way to show you would be to migrate my own website, carlalexander.ca, to the platform. We're going to go through the process from start to finish. Now, before we begin, I'm going to make a few assumptions. First, I'm going to assume that you already have an Ymir account. I'll also assume that you connected an AWS account to the team that you want to use for the migration. Finally, I'm going to assume that you have the Ymir command line tool already installed and that you're logged in. If you haven't done any of these things yet, you should do those first. The Ymir documentation has everything you need to go over these first few steps. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead with the migration. So, I'm already in the directory of my WordPress site. The first thing I want to do is initialize the project. To do that, I'm going to run the Ymir init command. I start by picking a name for the project, and then an AWS region for it. Since this is the first project that I'm creating on Ymir, the command also asks me to create some necessary team resources. First, it asks to create a database server since I don't have one. After giving the database server a name, it'll ask to create a network for it. Database servers need to be on the network, so creating one is mandatory. You'll have to pick a region for the network too. You should pick the same region as your project for the best performance. After that, we go back to the database server creation. You have to pick a database server size. I'm picking the smallest because it's just for my personal website, so it doesn't need a large database. Same thing for the database server storage. 25 gigs is the smallest amount of disk space you can give to a database server. Once that's done, the database server gets created. You'll be given the master username and password for the database server, which are blurred out here. Next, you can create databases for your project environments. This makes it easy to use the same database server for multiple projects. The last thing is installing the Ymir WordPress plugin. Because this is a Bedrock project, Ymir will install the plugin using Composer. For regular WordPress projects, they'll download it from GitHub. While the project is being set up, we're going to go ahead and do the next part of the migration. I want Ymir to manage the DNS for carlalexander.ca. To do that, we're going to have to create a DNS zone for it. That's done with the DNS zone create command. Since a DNS zone has a cost, the Ymir CLI will ask you to confirm before creating one. Once Ymir created the DNS zone, it'll display the name servers that point to it. We'll get back to those name servers later in the video. Now, I have the option to import the root DNS records of my domain. This is handy when migrating your DNS because most of the important DNS records are root DNS records, and Ymir makes it easy to import those. I don't have any subdomains that I want to import at the moment, so I skip those. This option is there because DNS servers don't let you scan for all DNS records. So if you have known subdomains that you'd also like to import, this is where to do it. You can also run the DNS zone import records command to import them later. Okay, so now I'm going to clear my screen. Next, I want to add the carlalexander.ca domain to my project configuration. So I open it up and add it under the production environment. At this point, we need to migrate the data from the old server to the new AWS infrastructure that Ymir built. We're going to start by migrating the media files. Ymir makes this process painless with the import uploads command. I specify the production environment, paste the SFTP URL to the uploads directory on my server, and then it's off. This command works for FTP and local files as well. While this is going on, I went ahead and exported the database from my old web server and then imported it on the new RDS database. I also went to Namecheap, my DNS registrar, and switched my domain name servers to the ones that the Ymir CLI displayed earlier. By the time I finished doing everything, the importation of all of the media files was done. It takes about 5 minutes for 2,000 files. Now we're almost at the end of the migration. One of the last steps is to deploy the project to production. We do this with the Ymir deploy command. Because this is going to be the first deployment, it'll take longer than usual to complete. Once the deployment completed, There's one last thing to do before we wrap up this migration. We need to update the upload directory in posts. With Bedrock, the path would start with app/uploads. But it's not the same with Ymir. It's just uploads. Fixing that takes a second. I just need to run a search and replace wp-cli command on the production environment. And that's it. The site is good to go now. I switch over to the browser, enter the vanity URL that Ymir created for the production environment, and the site shows up. And then if I click on my website logo, I can see that I get redirected to carlalexander.ca. Everything loads super fast, and none of the images are broken. Migrating a WordPress site shouldn't be something to dread. That's why Ymir tries to go above and beyond to give you the tools needed to do it painlessly. And that's even if you don't have a server anymore. If you'd like to learn more about Ymir, you can go to ymirapp.com.